Close your eyes and imagine a world before the first bird ever took flight, before the first dinosaur ever let out a roar. Go back to 300 million years when the Earth you know is nothing. In its place is a planet-wide hothouse. The air is so thick with humidity and oxygen that every breath feels like a shot of adrenaline. The forests here are alien. There are no oaks or pines. Instead, there are towering club mosses and giant ferns that reach 100 feet into the sky. But it's not the plants that will stop your heart. It's the shadows moving between them. High above the canopy, something with a 2-foot wingspan is patrolling the air. From a distance, you might mistake it for an eagle or a hawk. But as it dives, you hear it. Not a scream, but a low mechanical hum. It's Meganeura, a predatory dragonfly the size of a pigeon. On the ground, the rustling in the dead leaves isn't a snake or a small mammal. It's Arthropleura, a millipede longer than a car. Its armored body clicking as it glides over the swamp floor. How did this happen? How did nature break the laws of biology to create monsters from the smallest creatures on Earth? Why was the world once a kingdom of giants? And why is that world gone forever? To understand the rise of the monster insects, we have to look at a planet that was literally hyper-oxygenated. Welcome to the Earth, the Carboniferous Period. To appreciate why these giants were so unusual, we first need to understand why insects are small today. It isn't a lack of ambition, it's a hardware limitation. Humans and other vertebrates have an active respiratory system. We have lungs that pump air, and a heart that drives oxygen-rich blood through a closed loop of vessels to every cell in our body. We can grow large because our pump can reach any distance. But insects are passive. They don't have lungs. Instead, they breathe through a system of tiny holes along their abdomen called spiracles. These spiracles lead into a branching network of tubes called tracheae. This system relies entirely on a process called simple diffusion. Oxygen simply seeps into the tubes and travels to the cells. It's an incredibly efficient system for small animals, but it has a brutal physical limit. Diffusion only works over very short distances. If an insect grows too large, the oxygen molecules simply run out of steam before they can reach the internal organs. In our modern atmosphere, which is 21% oxygen, this diffusion limit keeps most insects under a few inches in size. But 300 million years ago, the Earth was going through a radical transformation. The massive burial of organic matter in swamps, which would eventually become the coal we mine today, meant that carbon wasn't being recycled back into the atmosphere. This led to a massive surplus of oxygen. Atmospheric oxygen levels didn't just rise, they exploded, reaching nearly 35%. For an insect, this changed everything. The high pressure of oxygen meant it could diffuse deeper and faster into larger bodies. The biological glass ceiling was shattered. The era of the giants had begun. Among all the monsters of the Carboniferous, none were as imposing as Arthropleura. If you encountered one today, you would think you were looking at an alien. Growing up to 8.5 feet long and weighing over 100 pounds, it remains the largest land invertebrate to ever crawl on this planet. It is an extinct genus of massive myriapod that lived in what is now Europe and North America around 344 to 292 million years ago. First discovered in 1849 during construction of a railway near Friedrichsthal in Germany. Arthropleura has consistently attracted much artistic and scientific attention. However, for over a century, scientists only had fragments of its shell, but recent discoveries have given us a complete picture about it. Arthropleura was a marvel of biomechanics. Its body was composed of dozens of overlapping plates made of chitin, a natural armor that was light enough to move but strong enough to protect it from the crushing weight of fallen trees. It had dozens of pairs of legs, each one coordinated by a decentralized nervous system that allowed it to move with surprising grace across the uneven swamp floor. But what did it eat? For a long time, we imagined Arthropleura as a terrifying predator, chasing down early amphibians and shredding them with giant mandibles. However, recent analysis of fossilized droppings and mouth parts suggests a different story. Arthropleura was likely detritivore, a giant recycler. In a world where trees were falling and rotting at an unprecedented rate, this monster was the ultimate cleanup crew, devouring massive amounts of decaying vegetation. But don't let its vegetarian diet fool you. With its sheer bulk and armored exterior, it had no natural enemies. It moved through the forest like an unstoppable tank, a silent king of the undergrowth. While Arthropleura claimed the land, the air belonged to Meganeura, a genus of extinct insects from the late Carboniferous, approximately 300 million years ago. With a wingspan of 28 inches, it was the largest flying insects of all time. But to call it a dragonfly is an understatement. Meganeura was a griffinfly, a specialized aerial predator that perfected flight long before the first feathers appeared. It is a member of the extinct order Meganeura, which are closely related to dragonflies and damselflies from the broader group Odonatoptera. Like other Odonatopterans, they were predatory, with their diet mainly consisting of other insects. Flight is the most energy-intensive activity in the animal kingdom. To stay in the air, an animal needs a massive amount of fuel and oxygen. In the 35% oxygen environment of the Carboniferous, Meganeura's muscles were essentially supercharged. It could flap its massive wings with a power and frequency that would be physically impossible in today's thin air. But it wasn't just about power, it was about precision. Modern dragonflies are the most successful hunters on Earth, with a kill rate of 95%. They don't just chase prey, they calculate intercept trajectories in midair. Meganeura possessed this same deadly intelligence, scaled up to the size of a raptor. Its eyes, consisting of thousands of individual lenses, took up most of its head, providing a high-speed 360-degree view of the world. It hunted smaller insects, early reptiles, and even fish near the water's surface. In the Carboniferous sky, Meganeura was the undisputed apex predator. It had no competition. There were no birds to hunt it, no bats to outmaneuver it. For nearly 50 million years, it reigned supreme as the terrifying master of the air. Our next monster was its most feared assassin. Imagine a scorpion, but stop thinking in inches, start thinking in feet. This is Pulmonoscorpius, one of the largest scorpions to have ever lived. Found in the fossil beds of Scotland, this creature shattered our understanding of ancient arachnids. Reaching lengths of up to 30 inches, nearly 3 feet long, it was the size of a large dog. But it wasn't just the size that was terrifying, it was the biological upgrades. Unlike modern scorpions that have tiny eyes and rely on touch because they hunt at night, Pulmonoscorpius had massive lateral compound eyes. This tells us it was a highly visual, active daylight hunter. It could see you from a distance. In the hyper-oxygenated world of the Carboniferous, this scorpion's metabolism was running at full throttle. It could sprint across the leaf litter with terrifying speed, chasing down early amphibians or lizard-like reptiles with the precision of a modern raptor. And then there was the tail, a massive curved stinger loaded with potent venom. In an era where its prey had not yet evolved thick hides or bony scales, a single strike from Pulmonoscorpius was enough to liquefy the nervous system of its victim in seconds. It is living proof that 300 million years ago, even the creatures we fear most today were once the undisputed rulers of the land. But the horrors of the Carboniferous didn't end at the water's edge. If you tried to escape the forest into the rivers or swamps for safety, you would be walking straight into the jaws of a monster that was even larger. Beneath the murky, stagnant surface lived the Hibbertopterus. This was a giant eurypterid, or sea scorpion. While Arthropleura dominated the land at over 6 feet, Hibbertopterus matched it in the water, with a massive bulky body that could exceed the height of a grown man and weighing hundreds of pounds. It was a nightmare from the abyss. Unlike its cousins on land, Hibbertopterus didn't have a stinger. But don't let that fool you into a false sense of security. It was arguably more dangerous. It possessed massive front limbs lined with sharp, jagged spines and sensory organs sensitive to the slightest vibration. It would bury its massive bulk in the river mud, waiting in total silence. When a prehistoric fish or a wayward amphibian swam above, Hibbertopterus would explode from the silt, hugging its prey with those spiked limbs and crushing it to death before dragging it into its horrific mouth parts. But what the detail that truly makes scientists shudder? Fossilized trackways show that this water monster could actually crawl onto land. It could move from one pond to another, dragging its massive wet body over the mud like an amphibious tank. There was no sanctuary, whether in the air, on land, or under the water. The Carboniferous was a world where the small had become the hunters, and everything else was merely prey. Nothing lasts forever, especially in the world of evolution. As the Carboniferous period drew to a close and moved into the Permian, the Earth began to change. The vast, humid swamps that produced the planet's oxygen began to dry out. The climate became more seasonal and arid. As the forests died back, the oxygen levels began to plummet. For the giant insects, this was a catastrophe. Their massive bodies, which were built for a 35% oxygen world, suddenly became their greatest liability. As the oxygen fuel in the air decreased, their passive respiratory systems could no longer reach the core of their giant muscles. They were literally suffocating in an environment that was becoming too thin for their survival. But the environment wasn't the only enemy. Our own ancestors, the vertebrates, were finally catching up. Early reptiles were becoming faster, smarter, and more adapted to the land. They evolved active breathing, warm blood, and eventually the ability to fly. When pterosaurs and later birds took to the skies, they didn't just compete with the giant insects, they ate them. The giant insects were trapped between a thinning atmosphere and a rising tide of smarter, more efficient predators. Evolution had only one choice: shrink or die. The giants that survived were the ones that became small, hiding in the cracks and shadows where the new vertebrate kings couldn't reach them. Today, we look at a dragonfly in our garden or a millipede under a rock and see something small, perhaps even insignificant. These creatures are the survivors of a lost empire. They are the refined, miniaturized versions of the greatest monsters the world has ever seen. The era of the giant insects was a unique moment in the history of life, a time when the atmospheric chemistry of the Earth allowed the underdogs to become the masters. It reminds us that life is not just shaped by DNA, but by the very air we breathe. If the oxygen levels were to rise again tomorrow, the giants would return. The blueprints are still there, hidden in the genetic code of every insect on Earth, waiting for the right atmosphere to unleash the monsters once more. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the age of giants. If you want to see more prehistoric mysteries, make sure to hit the subscribe button, like, and share this video. Until next time, stay curious.